and welcome to Chapel Time with me, Reverend Matt. Thank you so much for joining me today. Our Bible story today is about King Solomon. King Solomon was the third king of Israel in the Old Testament. And I thought Solomon would be a really good example for us about how one story rarely tells the whole story of a person or an event or a group of people. One story is never enough to tell everything about someone or something. Often when just one story is told about someone or something, it leaves out parts that make us uncomfortable. And as a result, can also often lead to hurting other people or forgetting people altogether. So let's take a look at Solomon's story and what we can learn from it. This is King Solomon. You may know him as the wisest person in the Bible. This comes from his most famous story in the Bible. In this story, Solomon is wise and makes a good decision about a baby, and which lady is the mom of the baby. King Solomon is wise and smart and makes the right decisions for his people. He is a good king. This is how most people remember Solomon. And while that is certainly part of his story, it is not the whole story. Did you know that Solomon used conscripted labor to build his palace and the temple for God? That's the term the Bible writers used to talk about slavery. And Bible writers pointed out that Solomon was a bad king for doing that. Did you also know that Solomon brought horses and chariots into Israel for his armies, and then also sold them to other countries for their armies? So Solomon made, traded, and sold weapons. Another thing Bible writers talked about being bad. So Solomon, the king of a people who were once slaves in Egypt, making buildings in the time of Moses, used his power as king to make the Israelites slaves again to make buildings in Israel. And then he made, traded, and sold weapons so Israel could become strong, just like Egypt. Many people would say what Solomon did led to the dividing of Israel into a split kingdom after he died. But we often just remember him as that wise good king who made a good decision about a baby. What a good story that helps us learn so much about how just one story about a person or a thing never really gives you the whole story. You see, we learn from Solomon that when somebody tries to tell just one story, often the things that might make that person feel bad are left out. Also, when just one story is told, other people are often ignored or forgotten. A lot of times, telling just one story can hurt other people and forget them entirely. So I challenge you, when you hear just one story about an event or a group of people or a thing, to really ask yourself, who's being left out? What's another way to think about this, especially when it comes to history? Some examples from my life. When I was growing up and I learned about the American Civil War, I was taught that the American Civil War was about states and what states could or couldn't do, or how states could make money. That's something called economics. But really, the American Civil War was about slavery. Another example is from the time of the Civil Rights Movement and Martin Luther King Jr. Part of the story that I was told was that we fixed that problem of people being treated badly because of their skin color. We fixed that problem. We fixed racism back then, and things are okay now. Well, I know that's not really how it worked. Yes, we made some progress back then, but we still have a long way to go before the problem is solved. So I encourage you, when you hear just one story about something, ask yourself, who's being left out? Who's being ignored? Because when we ask those kinds of questions and we refuse to just listen to just one story, we can help prevent the harm that comes to others from a single story. We can help prevent the forgetting of entire peoples. And that is definitely something good to work towards. Thank you so much again for joining me today. And before we go, I thought we could do the singing bowl together. As we do the singing bowl, I'm sure you remember it likes to be the only thing that makes noise. So we all have to sit still and quiet together so we can listen to the singing bowl sing its song. Some things that help me sit still and be quiet. I like to sit with crisscross applesauce, with my hands in my lap, and my bubble in. All right, so let's do those things together. Let's sit crisscross applesauce, hands in lap, bubbles in, and listen together. Excellent. Well done. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.